In the dusty archives of the British Museum, among thousands of clay tablets recovered from the sands of modern-day Iraq, lies a narrative that has challenged our fundamental understanding of human history for decades. These aren't just ledgers of grain or royal decrees. They are the remnants of the world's first organized civilization, the Sumerians. For years, scholars believed we had deciphered the core of their legacy, but recent reevaluations of specific cuneiform texts have uncovered a perspective on our origins that many find deeply unsettling. We are not just looking at myths. We are looking at a meticulously documented account of a period where the boundary between the divine and the terrestrial didn't just blur, it vanished. What these tablets allegedly reveal is a blueprint of human intervention that predates modern science by 6 millennia, suggesting that our sudden leap in evolution wasn't a biological coincidence, but a calculated decision. The story begins in the city-state of Nippur, where the Sumerian king list was unearthed. This isn't your standard historical record. It lists rulers who reigned for tens of thousands of years, descending into a period known as the time before the flood. While mainstream archaeology often categorizes these extreme lifespans as metaphorical or symbolic of golden ages, the consistency across different tablets suggests the Sumerians viewed these figures as objective historical realities. But it's the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis tablets that provide the most complex layers to this puzzle. According to these translations, the Sumerians believed they were created to serve a specific purpose by a group of beings they called the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Now, it's important to approach this with a balanced lens. According to many linguistic experts, these texts describe a hierarchy of gods who grew weary of maintaining the earth's resources themselves. Instead of a purely spiritual creation story, the Sumerian account reads like a technical manual. They describe a process where the essence of a celestial being was combined with a terrestrial clay. In a modern context, researchers like the late Zecharia Sitchin, though his work remains highly controversial, pointed out that the terminology used in these ancient descriptions bears a striking resemblance to what we now understand as genetic manipulation. The terrifying aspect that many enthusiasts point to isn't necessarily the presence of extraterrestrials, but the implication of our own autonomy, or lack thereof. If these translations are interpreted literally, humanity was designed as a Lulu, a primitive worker. This raises a haunting question that keeps historians awake at night. If a civilization that invented the wheel, the 60-minute hour, and advanced writing claimed their knowledge was a gift from higher beings, why are we so quick to dismiss the most detailed part of their testimony? Every 30 to 40 seconds of reading these tablets, you encounter another detail that seems out of place for a Bronze Age society. For instance, the Sumerians possessed an uncanny knowledge of our solar system. They accurately described the colors and compositions in Uranus and Neptune, planets that are invisible to the naked eye and weren't discovered by modern science until the invention of the telescope. How did a culture from 4000 BCE know that Neptune was a watery, blue-green world? This isn't just a lucky guess. It suggests a vantage point that was, literally, off-planet. The tension in the texts builds when we reach the era of the Great Flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods decide to wipe out humanity because our clamor had become too great. They could no longer sleep. It's a chillingly clinical reason for a global catastrophe. However, one being, Enki, reportedly went against the consensus of the Council of 12 to save a remnant of the human race. This portrays humanity not as the crown of creation, but as a byproduct of a celestial disagreement. We were caught in the middle of a conflict between entities who viewed our existence as an experiment that had perhaps grown too loud. As we dig deeper into the linguistic nuances, the word Abzu frequently appears. Long thought to be a mythical abyss or underworld, newer interpretations suggest it referred to a specific geographic location, the gold-rich regions of southeastern Africa. This aligns with recent archaeological finds of ancient mining operations in Africa that date back over 100 years, long before any known civilization should have had the capacity for large-scale resource extraction. If the Sumerian texts are correct, we weren't just created, we were deployed. But why would this be kept under wraps? Why is there such a pushback against these literal interpretations? The answer lies in the systemic disruption this would cause to our established timeline of human progress. We are taught that evolution is a slow, grinding process of millions of years. Yet the Sumerian records suggest a jumpstart. They describe the Adapa, the first model of a fully conscious human, who was given wisdom but denied eternal life. This detail is crucial. It suggests that our creators intentionally capped our biological potential, leaving us with the intellect to build civilizations, but the mortality to ensure we would never challenge the hierarchy. Think about the implications of that. Every achievement of the modern world, from the internet to space travel, could be seen as us operating within the boundaries of a preset sandbox. The terrifying revelation isn't a monster under the bed. It's the possibility that our drive for progress is actually a programmed directive left behind by a civilization that moved on long ago. Or, perhaps more unsettlingly, a civilization that is still watching. The tablets also mention a returning cycle. They speak of a celestial body called Nibiru, which follows a vast elliptical orbit, returning to the inner solar system every few thousand years. While astronomers today search for Planet 9 to explain the gravitational anomalies in our outer solar system, the Sumerians were already writing about it on clay cylinders. They believed that whenever this celestial body drew near, the gods would return, and major shifts in human history would occur. It provides a cyclical rather than linear view of time, one where we are constantly being monitored or recalibrated. As we examine the Kultepe tablets or the Lament for Sumer, we see descriptions of weapons of terror that caused evil winds which turned the sky dark and made the water undrinkable. To a traditional historian, this is poetic language for a sandstorm or a drought, but to a physicist, these descriptions are eerily reminiscent of the after effects of a nuclear event. The texts describe people's hair falling out and skin peeling, symptoms of radiation sickness, long before the concept of an atom was ever conceived. If these translations are accurate, it means ancient Mesopotamia was the site of a high-tech conflict that decimated the world's first superpower. This brings us to the Shining Ones, the figures depicted in Sumerian art with bags in their hands and watches on their wrists. For years, these were dismissed as decorative elements. But when you see the same iconography in the Olmec carvings of Mexico and the Göbekli Tepe pillars in Turkey, sites separated by thousands of miles and years, the coincidence becomes impossible to ignore. There was a standardized kit of knowledge being handed out across the globe. We aren't looking at isolated cultures developing in a vacuum. We are looking at a global project. The Sumerian account of the Seven Sages, or the Apkallu, further reinforces this. These were said to be beings who emerged from the sea to teach humanity the arts of civilization, agriculture, mathematics, and law. They were described as fishmen, which sounds absurd until you consider that a primitive person might use the word scales to describe a metallic or pressurized diving suit. By stripping away the mythological labels and looking at the actions described in the texts, a very different picture of our history emerges. Ultimately, the translation of these ancient texts reveals a paradox. We are a species with amnesia. We have these incredibly detailed records from the very beginning of our recorded history that tell us exactly who we are and where we came from, yet we treat them as fairy tales because the truth they offer is too disruptive to our sense of self-importance. We want to believe we are the masters of our destiny, the product of a natural, unguided process. The Sumerians, however, tell us that we are part of a much larger, much older, and much more complex cosmic theater. The mystery of the Sumerians doesn't end with a translation. It begins there. It challenges us to look at our technological advancements not as new inventions, but as a re-remembering of a lost inheritance. If you found the implications of these ancient texts fascinating, you need to see our investigation into the recent discoveries at Göbekli Tepe. It seems the Sumerians weren't the first to receive this knowledge, and the structures found in Turkey suggest the timeline of intervention goes back even further than we ever dared to imagine.